So my name is Phyllis Mbiu, and I'm Programs Associate from Victoria Ventures, and we are part of the team working on the develoPPP program. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. There is a lot in store for you just to understand this program and how this program can be of essence and of help to your startup. So I guess just to get going, thank you, Ali, is to introduce Wilfred Moria. He's the project lead, and he'll be taking us through the project and explaining it into details. So Wilfred.
Thanks, Phyllis. Maybe you can confirm that you can hear me clearly,
yes,
and that the screen is visible.
Yes, the screen is visible.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening to everyone who's on the webinar this evening, and welcome to the info session for the next call for applications for the develop Ventures program. I'll beg your pardon because my camera isn't behaving, so I hope at least the image on my screen will be a good representation of who I am. But I'll just go ahead. So the develop Ventures program, I'm sure you have all perhaps seen this on social media or somewhere else, and that's why you're interested in the program and applying for the program. The whole program, as you can quite clearly tell, perhaps from the wording on the screen, is about supporting startups, especially development-oriented startups, as to capital the capital, they can enhance their impact through their businesses. And this info session is specifically targeted at the current call for proposals, that's call for applications rather, that is open. And it opened on November 15th and will close on December 31st. So that's the first important piece of information, is the closing date for this round of applications. The program runs in a 2-year cycle. I'll come to this in a minute, but just for your information, it runs in a 2-year cycle. So we had the first cohort, or rather the first cohort for this year, which is cohort 5 for the program as a whole, which is currently in the last stages before disbursement for those startups and companies that were successful for that application. So just to go ahead, about develop Ventures. So I'll do about half of this presentation looking at the program, what it's about and what it entails, and then I'll invite my colleague Kelvin to touch on the requirements for the program and so on. So, and I think that's the screen there. So that's the agenda for the meeting. We'll start with some introductions. I'll talk about the program. I'll give you 2 examples of previously funded companies. And then my colleague Kelvin will take through the application process. And myself, Kelvin, and our other colleague from VC4A, Chandni, will explain, we'll take some questions and we can, and point you to other resources where we may. We're hoping to be able to wind up this in about 40-45 minutes. To begin with, I'll just give a quick introduction of Victoria Ventures, then I'll ask Chandni to talk a bit about VC4A and DEG Impulse. So Victoria Ventures is a firm that does a lot of work in enabling entrepreneurship and especially the startup ecosystem, especially in Kenya. We do 3 main things. One is we have an arm that's on consultancy, short and long-term consultancy projects. We are also a fund management company, and we run a business angel network called Victoria Business Angels Network. The website is Victoria is with a k.co.ke, and you can learn more about us there. Chandni, perhaps you could just give a quick 1-2 lines about VC4A and DEG.
Yes, I will. Thanks, Wilfred. Sorry, I'm unable to start my video. It's the Zoom doesn't let me do that, but that's fine. I can just make the quick introduction. So yeah, hi everybody. My name is Chandni, and I am with the VC4A team. So maybe just to start with a brief introduction about DEG, who of course is part of the German Development Bank, that essentially has a mandate to invest in development-focused startups. So DEG is currently looking at investing in Kenya and Tanzania for this cohort, with the intention to increase the companies going forward in the next iterations. But for the purpose of this call, of course, we are focusing only on Kenya as the as the geographic location. So DEG has actually been running this for 6 cohorts now. This is actually the 6th cohort that we are making a call for applications for. So there's actually quite a good, I would say, portfolio there. So if possible, you can always join, you can always have a look on the DEG's website to see who this portfolio is. We can even try and share a link here in the chat once I've finished. And yeah, so VC4A, we are also an entrepreneurship organization, which I'm sure many people here on this call might be a part of. A lot of startups create profiles on our page, and we share these with investors that are also part of our network. We obviously run a lot of entrepreneurship programs. We have a flagship program called our Venture Showcase, which some of you might be familiar with. And so as part of our entrepreneurship work around the continent, we are working with Victoria Ventures to support DEG on finding the right startups, investing in the right startups within this region, and then of course continuing onwards with providing them with technical assistance. But all of these, of course, program specifics, my colleagues here, Kelvin and Wilfred, can share. And of course, if there's any other questions, please, just drop any within the chat, and we can always pick them up and answer as we're, progressing with the presentation here. All right, back to you, Kelvin and Wilfred.
Thanks, Chani. So just to go into the first part of the presentation, a general about develoP. develoP Ventures is an initiative of DG, as you just heard, and the whole idea is assisting or enabling young companies with innovative businesses that are addressing some aspect of social and environmental impact to raise the capital and to increase their chances of scaling and going beyond the very early stages of development. So as you guys are aware, the typical startup life cycle from proof of concept, value of death, and onwards. So DEG comes in, especially at the earliest stages, through the develoP Ventures program to provide additional support through funding, through grant funding, and through technical assistance to help young businesses, young impact-oriented businesses to scale up. The project is available, or the program is available in Kenya, Ghana, Tanzania, Nigeria. For purposes of this call, we will basically be addressing Kenya. So Victoria Ventures is the implementing partner for together with VC4A locally in Kenya, that is. The assistance includes a grant of $100,000, which has to be matched, and I'll talk about the matching aspect later on. It's an aspect that is not unique, but we constantly have programs about, so questions about, so we'll address that. So it's a matched funding opportunity, and the program also provides some level of technical assistance with regards to various aspects depending on the needs of the company to help with scaling up. And the fund has to be at least up to 50, well, it has to be a maximum of 50% of your total investment. So many of you probably are raising capital at the moment, or you want to propose a special initiative that you want to do. You may not be fundraising actively, but you may be raising funds for something specific. Funding can only take up to 50% as a maximum of budget that you're looking at. And I'll explain that again in a minute. So the minimum requirements to be met by your company: one, the company has to be registered in Kenya. The funding has to go to a Kenyan entity. You may be operating in other markets, and we have portfolio companies that are operating in other markets in Nigeria and other places. But for purposes of the funding, we'd look at the Kenyan entity, and that's where we'd be targeting to deploy the funds if you're successful. The company has to be privately owned and profit-oriented. So this funding is not for non-profit type of work. It has to be going to a business that is operating as a business, as a going concern, and that is interested in scaling up and getting to profitability. You have to have a sound business and financial plan. So again, it's not idea stage, sort of. It is a few stages ahead of idea stage. And that's why we also look for at least 1 year of annual financial statements. We can consider management accounts, but even better if they are audited accounts, and we can show that you have been actually operating for at least 1 year. Of course, the more the better. There's no maximum as such in quotes, but at least 1 year of financial statements, preferably audited. Another important thing is DG provides this funding as a co-funding with a co-funding approach. So there has to be a matching fund or matching funds with the funding that they're providing. So it could be that you are fundraising right now and you want to supplement your fundraising, and you've already raised some amount of capital to date. I'll talk about the specifics, but then this will have to be in addition to that. It can't be the funding that you're seeking, and it can't be more than 50% of what you're raising. So if you're raising anything less than 200,000, or you have a positive budgeted at anything less than 200,000, then it will not qualify. It has to be at least 200,000 above. Then on the other side is the company should not have received more than 2 million euro in funding. And that speaks to the stage of business that this type of funding is directed. So we're not looking at your, so to speak, in quotes, Series A and above. We are looking at pre-series, pre-seed, and seed sort of stage companies. And obviously there has to be a viable financial plan, and these things, we look at them in quite some detail if you are shortlisted at the future stages. And you have to demonstrate that the company is on track to, even if it hasn't yet broken even, at least in the next 3 years. That, I would say, can be discussed depending on the specific circumstances of the business and the business model and the type of service and offering that you're providing. But generally speaking, we are looking for businesses that at least can break even in the next 3 years. The matching fund aspect, as I said, quickly in a bit more detail. So the company must have received matching funds equaling the amount of the grant or more. So if we are giving 100,000, if DEG is providing 100,000 euro, sorry, not 300,000, but 100,000 euro in funding, then there has to be at least another 100,000 matching with their funding. It can be more, but it has to be at least 100,000. Of the additional capital is a prerequisite for first investment. So if you are successful and you haven't yet received, so maybe you have a commitment for the 100,000 or more, but you haven't actually received it, or DG would hold until you have proven that you have at least drawn down a part of that committed funding. So it's a pretty strict requirement to demonstrate that there is matching funding, that there are other funders or other investors who are at the table as well. The matching funds can be considered if received up to 6 months prior to the application, as long as the funds are predominantly available to the company. So, and this comes up often with companies. So the short way of putting this is, if you have been fundraising and you received funds in January of this year, and you've already utilized those funds, then that will not qualify as matching funds. So for purposes of this cohort, we'll be looking at a 6-month window from the point of being accepted into the program. And that will be the earliest at which your matching funds should have at least kicked in. Earlier than that, then it will not be considered matching funding. So it has to also be recent funding. And that should also inform you, if you're actively fundraising, to consider when you're expecting, if you haven't actually drawn down, when you'd expect to draw down on any funding that is being made available to you. So back to minimum requirements, from a business model perspective, DG is very big on, or this program rather is very big on innovation. So there has to be an element of innovation, especially within the market concept. So it doesn't have to be something entirely new in the world, but either your approach or your business model or your kind of approach to the market or the product or service that you're offering, whichever dimension it is, there has to be some kind of innovation in the target country that we operate in. So in Kenya, in this case, there has to be, prospects of scaling up in future, and you have to demonstrate that you're able to measure your impact, particularly with regards to the sustainable development goals. And just as a tip, again, we've come across this with the last cohort that we were working through, but it may be useful for you to start thinking about the SDGs if you've never thought about it before you apply for this program, and see how your business is contributing to whichever one amongst the 17 SDGs or specific targets within those SDGs. So that's again has to be clearly demonstrated, because the funds are impact oriented and are coming from an impact oriented investor. So there has to be a demonstration that your business at core, or the project you're bringing in at its core, is addressing one or more of the SDGs. Women-led companies and growing businesses that are promoting gender equality are especially encouraged to apply. So with that, I will just give you a few examples of previously funded companies. We'll have a short Q&A later, and I can see a few questions have already come. We'll try and answer them towards the end, all of them, as many as we can. But that gives you the basics of what is required in terms of what this funding is targeted for, what it is structured for, and what it is required from you as a company to access this funding, or to at least stand a chance of qualifying. I should say that typically we would select, Chan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, anywhere between 5 and 7 companies at a maximum per cohort. Last time we had 100+ applications at the first, which went through several stages of shortlisting. Eventually, we had 12 companies in Kenya, specifically about 12 companies roughly, that went. At that stage, we ended up selecting, I believe, 5 or 6 that are now are going towards funding. So that may again help to put in context where the program is, and so it's quite competitive in a word. So previous funded companies, I'll give you 2 examples, at least in Kenya. One is Kudura Power, and Kudura Power is a business that's still operating. They've gone on and have raised additional funding beyond this. So this is back in 2017 when the project, 2019 when the project came to DEG. Project was budgeted as 240,000 at that time, and that was for specific activities. So what happens is, once you've been accepted, there's an aspect of quantifying what the total amount of funding is required to do what you're proposing to do within your company, and then we'd match against that. So for this company, it was priced or given 240,000 budget, of which DG Ventures provided 100,000. The business is principally involved in the renewable energy space, particularly distributed renewable energy and mini grids. And you can see some of the statistics there about the company and what it does. But suffice it to say that it's from the perspective of providing electricity or access to renewable, sustainable sources of electricity to underserved markets, that's where the primary impact comes from. And you can see that is clearly measured in terms of metric tons of carbon dioxide mitigated, and so on, jobs created, households connected, and so on. So that gives you an idea of, when we talk about impact measurement, sort of some of the things. A company is Mobile, which is a fintech that was developing digital management solutions for public transit. So this company is in the public transport sector, and the main highlights here are that there are the results of the project included over 500 bus drivers being given better working conditions and their employment being more formalized. 40% more income for bus companies that were utilizing this solution, and 35 more jobs created within the company and its ecosystem, and an increase in the number of bus companies that were being served. So with that, I will hand over to Kelvin. I don't know whether I should continue using this screen, or Kelvin, whether you'll share your screen to talk a bit about how to apply for funding.
So I can use your screen. So, and before I talk, or maybe guide the startup on how to apply on or maybe all the investment process, I think I've seen Alexander from DEG has raised a hand. Alexander, please go on. Hello?
Yeah, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is Alexander Neuvert from the DG team. Yeah, happy to have a lot of people joining today. So I think Chandni has already very well presented DG and the ventures team. So nothing more to add from my side, but also happy to answer some questions in the end for the startups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexander.
Thanks,
So
Alexander.
my name is Kelvin Kipkorir, program associate, and I wish to say thank you for joining this info session. And my colleague Wilfred will take you through the demo on what you'll encounter once you click on applying. So I'll be taking you through the investment process, the whole journey. I know as a founder, you are interested in knowing how long is this whole process going to take us. So, and what I've encountered in Code 5 after reviewing the startup, we encountered that there were most startups that did applied, and they were questioning why they were unable to receive the communication from the VC4A team. And the reason was that they were unable to complete their application. So the first step is application, and not just applying. You need to make sure that at least you can set aside good time to make sure that you apply until you submit and you get a confirmation that you have now fully applied, so that you can move to the next step. So the first step is just application. Make sure that you confirm that you have applied and completed your application, because we had 59 startups in Kenya applied, but midway they dropped, and they expected that they had completed the application. So make sure that at least you apply so that you can move to the pre-selection. So the second step is pre-selection. That's where we now review the startup. We score you according to the criteria. I hope you have gone to the website and you have seen that there is innovation, one of the criteria that will be scored against. Then there is part for development impact. There is for financial sustainability. There is part of the team management. Also, how are you fit to take this startup to scalability and reaching more people and creating impact. So before you reach to the second step, make sure that you completed your application, then sit back. Then we review, we'll score you against the criteria. Then after pre-selection, we'll shortlist the startup that will proceed to pitching. And the whole step from application, after application, the pre-selection does not take too much time, because we have a great team. We have a lot of people, so we share the work. So the startup that will be shortlisted will receive official communication from VC4A. Preparing now, they will get an information that they have qualified to go for pitching. Then our team will share communication on how we are going to set up a dry run, at least to prepare the startup, on how to pitch and what is expected during the main pitching. Then after the pitching, now we'll shortlist the startup that will proceed to the due diligence. And this is where it takes much time, and simply because most of the startup that proceed to the due diligence, sometimes if you don't have all your arsenal at the right spot, where that if an investor asks for maybe a certain document, you have all of them, then we can fast track that process and take so little time. So the due diligence is in form of in person. The team from VC4A and DG and our local partner, which is Victoria Ventures, will visit your place. Then we'll have that formal due diligence. After that, we'll have the post documentation, where we prepare some documents that will help the team from DG at least to present you to their internal IC. Now with all those documents, there are 3 annexes. The one is about the general overview about the company. The second is about the it's about the development impact and economic impact. There are those milestones that we need to set. We agree with the startup, and then we'll use that one at least to see if you are, after you have received the funding, if you at least you'll qualify for the phase B, which will guarantee you, if you will hit those milestones, at least you'll be able to get 100,000 or even more. So that is Annex 3, and then there's Annex 4, that's about the financial model. That is that you need to make sure that at least if you qualify to pitching and you have continued to the due diligence, at least make sure that at least you start preparing early, at least your financial model, at least the 3 financial statement, that is the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow. Because I think what we encountered in Code 5 is that there are some startups that had a P&L and the balance sheet and the cash flow are missing, and that made us to take much time. So we expect that at least now that you, during this info session, you understand that is what you will be expected. At least if you qualify to due diligence, at least make sure that you prepare everything, have your documents ready, then we can fast track this thing, and then we sign the contract. So after due diligence, then you'll enter into internalize here DG level, then whereby they'll go through the documents and also validate what we have done so far. Then once we get approval from DG that you can proceed for the contract, now you can sign the contract, and then the funding will be channeled. Then the other thing that we'll do, DG is so passionate in helping startups that they fund at least to enable them to achieve the economic and development impact that we will have agreed that you will be tracking and measuring. So, and in that journey, you'll not work alone. We'll work with you throughout the 12 months or maybe 18 months by offering you the technical assistance. So we'll have a place where after due diligence, we'll have a case where we'll have to take you through the need assessment to understand where are the areas that you need at least support from the team or maybe experts. At least we can offer you that in form of technical assistance, and that is a journey that will be on continuous basis. So even if we go to Code 6, we'll be having technical assistance for Code 5, and then when we roll out to, let's say, Code 8, we'll continue offering technical assistance in our team. So that is the whole process. So it is not a long process if the startup prepare everything that is required by the investor. So make sure that you have everything, prepare everything in advance, because I think these are open evaluation that you may stand a chance to get the funding. So I think so far we have received very few complete application, and we are going towards the holiday session. I think I will encourage you to make application as early as next week so that you can complete. Once you can complete your application, you will enable us to start reviewing those startups that will have completed their review, their application, so that we can review as early as possible, so that by, let's say, the first week of January, at least we could have pre-select all the startup and end up selecting those ones that will proceed for pitching, so that we can fast track this whole process and then ensure that you get the funding in timely manner. So the call for application started in 15, and now we are heading towards December. So we have, let's say 3 weeks before deadline. Deadline is 31st. So I encourage you to apply fast, then you can focus on other things. So mark your date that the application will be closing on that first. There is no flexibility to that. So make sure that at least you do that. So I think I'll hand over to Wilfred, who will give a short demo, I think less than 3 minutes. And then from there, we'll allow you to have Q&A.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, I hope the whole process is clear. It's very straightforward. So there are a few things which Kelvin mentioned, which perhaps we didn't capture in the introduction bit. And one of those is the fact that, yes, if you are successful at the first or with this application and you get funded, there is an opportunity for follow-on support from DEG. That is a separate thing, but if you've gotten into the program and you're part of the cohort, then there remains a possibility for further funding through DEG as a second phase. So we actually look at this as a phase 1 and as a phase 2. The second aspect is the technical assistance. So we do give in addition to the funding, the partners, and also, as the case may be utilizing third-party service providers, depending on the need of the company, offer an amount of technical assistance. So there are a number of days that can be assigned, and through the course of the program or the funding period, which the 18 mentioned, we'd extend technical assistance depending on your need, and there's a separate needs assessment that is done to establish that. The other thing is maybe to emphasize on is due diligence. Yes, that is a physical due diligence. So if you pass the third stage, if you're shortlisted after the pitching stage, due diligence does require us to visit your premises. You'd be required to prepare a data room. So the whole idea of the Ventures program is that it's designed to go alongside your fundraising journey. So it's you can consider it as part of your fundraising, if your fundraising that is, and that's why we require the matching funds. It's sort of mobilizing and catalyzing more funders, or to bring more funders to the table. We'd like to believe that this funding can also be instrumental to you as a company to demonstrate to your other investors or prospective investors that there is some backing that is available to you from another party. So to that extent, we do conduct a thorough due diligence. You'll be required to prepare a data room, which will, if you've done any fundraising, you can imagine what should be in that data room. Kelvin also mentioned about a financial model. We don't expect that it would maybe be a full-on financial model with all the bells and whistles of a company that's raising its Series A or B or C. Remember, again, the target is seed and early stage companies that we are targeting, but at least it should be a model that, one, highlights your key assumptions and makes those very clear. And thirdly, at the end, you should have your linked 3 statements. So your balance sheet, your cash flow, and your P&L linked and all connected. So it should be a decent fit for purpose financial model, at least at the stage that you're in. Another thing to note is what you put in the application form in terms of numbers or details, they should match across all your documents. So there's a form field in the application, includes a form field, and I hope I'll few minutes, but the form includes a form fill section, and there are some attachments to be added. And then later on, if you get to the diligence stage, then documents, but you have to be consistent across all of your documents. So let's not say, we have raised 1 million here, and then we haven't raised any money in another document, and then the other document says something different, or that we are projecting that, we'll have broken even, or we'll have reached a certain level of revenue by end of 2024, and then another document says something different, and another document says something different. So consistency is very important, and it becomes very useful for those that will get to the contracting stage, because Kelvin alluded to some of the documentation that's required, but there's specific documentation that's required at the contract stage, which is much easier to get over or to get through with, or to manage if you've been consistent from application through to the contracting stage. So with that, I don't know, Chani, are there any questions as I maybe look at whether I can pull up the application form? Chani, are there any questions that perhaps you want to answer directly?
Yeah, sure. So
On
I've
the chat
actually
box
been
or the
answering I've actually been answering some of the questions on the chat, but maybe just to address a couple of common questions that have come up a few times, just so everybody can get it here. So yes, the expectation is you should be a revenue generating business post-revenue. Unfortunately, we cannot accept startups that are still at an idea stage or an MVP stage. Really, the intention is to help grow the startups that already are generating some revenue. So that's one question that has come up a couple of times. And then I think another common question that has come up, I've seen a couple of things about sectors. So it is sector agnostic. The intention is that you are a development impact focused business. That doesn't matter which sectors you are focusing on. Yeah, so that's a couple of common questions I'm seeing. Yeah, I think Wilfred, I can continue to just answer the questions in the chat, and yeah, you can pull up the application.
Okay. So, I hope my screen is visible again.
Yes.
Somebody also asked about how to get in touch with Victoria. Those are the contacts for Victoria in Kenya, specifically for this program. So you can send us an email and so on. That is the link that you should be following to the Ventures program. Another key thing to highlight is when you go to this webpage, first of all is you'll find all the information that we have provided through this webinar here. There's a section that should have additional questions. So you can find a lot of that information. You can get some of the project examples that we've talked about. Now here, if you go to the funding program, and just bear in mind, there are two things here, and especially if you go to the Apply Now page. So once you click on the Apply Now, it says Apply Now for funding. There's your minimum requirements. Then there are these two. So for the purposes of this call, what we're interested in is the develop ventures. So we've had in the past businesses that put in an application for develop classic, the one that I'm highlighting. That's not the one that you want to go for. So the classics program is a separate program that is targeted at more mature companies. As you can tell from the description there, what we are interested in is the ventures program. Yeah. So that's the one that you want to click find out and apply more, find out more and apply. Then you can download the conditions of participation, and all the key things: Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania. There are more countries which are coming, but for this purpose, again, it's specifically Kenya. The current cohort has Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, well, separately. And then a bit about what to expect, and what to apply. Then, importantly, before you even apply, on this page, if you scroll further down, I'd highly encourage you to go through the frequently asked questions. There are a number of details which maybe we may have overlooked, or where you may have questions, but most of those will be answered through this Q&A, things to do with the matching funds and so on and so forth, and what specifically is being looked for. And then from there, you can click switch to the application form, and it should take screen. I just realized I don't have my account details with me ready. So you'll have to trust. I don't know whether Chani or anyone else has an application account that you can log in with, but it's your typical form fill. You log in. There are some questions to answer. The questions will cover all aspects of your business model. So it'll help if you have a business plan already written, because you can just almost copy paste from that, because there are questions around the product, the market, the team. There are questions about your past fundraising or current funders and expected future funding. So all those aspects around your business model and also your funding, and then you'd attach the business model and any other document. So that's how to access that. So again, the direct link to the application page is oap.develop.de. So out of that, and now you know that I was doing Python programming. But that's about it for that. I don't know whether anyone else has something to add, either Kelvin or Chadney or Alexandra.
Nothing from me, Wilfred. I'm just answering the questions, but if there's any other questions, yeah, Kelvin or anyone, yeah, please feel free to jump in. Maybe Alex, if she might have anything else to add.
No, actually, nothing to add. I think you explained it quite well. Yeah, and we really encourage you to send in the applications, because and also, I mean, we couldn't log in, but yeah, it's quite a brief application process on the online, so it's not too many questions to answer, and I think everything should be quite easy to answer by you. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to find my account and I still can't. So yeah, it's not a cumbersome process. Just create an account, get approved, log in, and you just go ahead with the application. So with that, I trust Chani has managed to answer many of the questions. There was one about whether this is a Uganda, unfortunately not for this cohort. Unless I'm mistaken, Alexandra, but Uganda is not included currently, is it?
No. So for DG, it's just Tanzania and Kenya, and yeah, GIZ is covering Nigeria, but these are the target countries at the moment. So maybe in the future, but not right now.
Okay. And with that, I think we'll come to the close of the webinar. We hope that we've answered many of your questions, or at least given you a hint where to go to find information. You can also reach out by email. We'll be posting information on social media, particularly LinkedIn, so you may want to follow Victoria Venture on LinkedIn. We post updates there and information about the program actively. Similarly with VC4A, which many of you probably already know. And we look forward to receiving your applications in due time and hopefully working with you down the line, some of you down the line. Like we said, it's quite competitive. So, on balance, it is competitive. But if you put in a good application and you have your information, your ducks in a row, you do stand a good chance. So looking forward to receiving your applications and all the best. So
Great,
I think,
thank you.
Phyllis, that's it. We can end the session. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Wilfred. And we're looking forward to the applications, and follow us on LinkedIn to get these updates live. So thank you so much.